So, just like a spiritual community like ours, I heard about this preacher who wanted to also speak about forgiveness. And, he gave this lovely sermon about the power of forgiveness and the power of not having enemies and making peace with the enemies. And at the end, he was a very courageous minister. So at the end of his talk, he says, "And now, are you all willing to forgive all your enemies? Raise your hand." And everybody raised their hand except for one woman in the back. He's like, "Wait a minute. Why didn't you raise your hand? Why aren't you willing to forgive your enemies?" And she says, "Well, simple. I have no enemies." It's like, "Oh, wow. Okay. Well, how old are you?" She was looked a little young. And so she's like, "Well, I'm 96 years old." "You're 96 years old and you have no enemies?" "Nope, none at all." She's like, "You have to come up here. You got to share your wisdom with the rest of the community on how you were able to live to 96 years old and have no enemies." And so she gets up and she says, "Easy. I outlived those jerks." So that's one way. And actually, honestly, feeling those feelings of having enemies and resentment and anger and hurt, actually, they do the opposite. They really take away from our life force, right? They take away our energy, and you can feel that in a physical way. It affects your physical health to hold on to resentments, and I'm sure that many of us have experienced it because we're in the midst of it. It just doesn't feel good. Our immune system goes down, our stress levels go up. As a result of it, it's been proven that it actually, you have a more chance of heart attacks and heart disease, and so holding on to resentments, we are just told, is not medically sound. Now, here at Unity, we also tell you it's not emotionally sound. There are ways, and maybe you've experienced it yourself, when you're holding a resentment and it just so gets you, and you're just trying to hold on to it so hard that it also starts to color the experiences of other relationships. Have you found that? That when you're really having an issue with one person, all of a sudden, all the other issues are starting to come up, and you're having issues with other individuals that you normally wouldn't because you might just let things go or things aren't coming up in the same way. And it also takes a toll on our spiritual health because we do know that we are energy, that we are vibration. And the holding off of resentments is a much lower vibrational field. And part of our spiritual journey is to continually invite us, I believe, to move from the more dense energies into the more uplifting energies, the truth of not only who we are, but the truth of where we are meant to live in that higher level of consciousness, and being able to move through the resentments and move through the anger and move through the desires that we sometimes have because we are human, or I'll just say that I have because I am human, of retaliating. And I know that sometimes we think that it's so far gone from who we are to think that we would retaliate, although if we're honest, we would start to look at some of the ways in which we do, because retaliation is not just a physical retaliation, right? We know that our words can be retaliatory, our emotions and how they show up in our relationships can be retaliatory, and more importantly, in Unity, we believe in the power of our thoughts. Our thoughts can be retaliatory. And so how are we mindful about releasing those? The things that we know aren't healthy for us, and the things that we know are constricting us to where we are, rather than helping us move to where we want to go, where we want to be. Now, I understand that there's the old adage of, I can forgive, but I don't have to forget, right? We've heard that. How many of us have been brought to a greater sense of peace in forgiveness when you're told, well, but you don't have to forget, right? Like, you can forgive, but you don't have to forget, because sometimes we get stuck in that forget part. And while there are parts of that are true, I've come to recognize that actually there's a lot that we are asked to forget in order to forgive. Because we're asked to forget that we aren't children of God. We're asked to forget that we are unworthy of experiencing love and harmony in all of our relationships. We're asked to forget our perceptions of other people and trust in the reality of what is taking place within us and how we are meant to show up. And so I want to talk to you today about some of those pieces that in forgiveness we are invited to forget and to release. But before that, I want to share with you this quote that I think speaks to the power of forgiveness in our lives and what forgiveness actually is. And it's from Mark Twain, and he says, "Forgiveness is the fragrance that the violet sheds on the heel that has crushed it." How many of us would be willing to do that? Because the way that I see it is that that violet, that beautiful flower, is always giving away its scent, right? It's in its nature to give its scent. And how many times do we stop ourselves when we feel crushed or challenged or judged by others from living into our truth, from doing what is in our divine nature to do and be, which is love, which is light, which is grace, which is the power of forgiveness, the power of releasing and letting go to move into a greater understanding of what is truly going on, which is just a desire for greater connection, a desire for greater understanding of our truth and who we are in God. And I believe that just like the violet, when it's crushed, the fragrance goes out even stronger in moments where we feel judged, in moments where we feel challenged, in the difficult experiences that we may be living through. That in itself will bring out even more of our good if we let it. Because it is all part of our spiritual unfoldment. It is all part of us being able to heal that which is within us that needs to be healed, especially through the power of forgiveness. See, in unity, we come to understand that one of our main principles is that we are all one. There is only oneness. And anything that is keeping us from fully living into that is an illusion. Now, an illusion that feels really true, an illusion that has an effect on us, and an illusion because it is a false way of seeing the reality. It is a minimized way of seeing what is really going on. How many of us have experienced it where we thought we knew the whole story, and then we came to find out we didn't know any of the story? And what is resentments in a spiritual sense, right? Like, I want to get, it's hard to live it, right? It's hard to live it. And what is resentment but a misperception of somebody's misperception of what is going on? None of us have the full story. None of us have a full understanding of what's going on. And when somebody wrongs me, they're doing it based on their perceptions, what they're going through, what they're living through, their ideas, and then I'm having a reaction based on my perceptions, my ideas, what's going on for me. And it's a misperception of a misperception. And all of a sudden, that misperception causes harm, causes hurt. And we, a lot of times, keep ourselves in that. I know we don't do it consciously, although maybe some people do it consciously, or maybe I've done it consciously sometimes. But the power of victimization, right? Of thinking that life is happening to us and that we have no role in it, it's strong. It can really release some of the responsibility. But here in unity, we understand that we do have a responsibility. And that responsibility is to continue on our spiritual unfoldment, to see, experience, and to know and express the very power that God is through and as us, the love and the light that God is, and to be able to move through the sense of separation and move through the sense of illusion into the place of oneness and truth. For we are part of that flow of God's grace. And the moments that we are holding on to resentment, I mean, even like the way that I'm like talking about it now, like you notice, right? Like resentment. What do? I bring in my, what are these called again? Fists, thank you. I went to arms and then the hands and fists, right? But I'm constricting them. I'm bringing it in. I'm holding it in. Isn't that what resentment feels like to you? Constriction, not a flow of it, right? And when things are going well, when we are sort of flowing with the activity of God, when we are sharing our love with a loved one, how does that feel? expansive, like a flow, right? And so the invitation is to do the work that is for us to do, to move from the place of constricting who we are to allowing ourselves to flow like the river and channel what we are into the world in greater ways. And so do we want to be a part of God's flow of good, or do we want to have that stagnant energy, being stuck in either the past or the ways in which we have been wronged? And when I say the past is because, think about it, when we are holding on to resentment, the thing already took place, right? But how many times do we relive it? Right? Like, oh, we're so upset because they hurt me. And here I am, I'm going to be thinking about how they hurt me and hurting myself in the process more and more and more times. And so the ways in which we are able to release that resentment and know that it is actually for our own good. Yes, it can benefit the relationship. Yes, it can benefit whatever we are moving through. But that's because it benefits us. Because it allows us to live into our world and to live into our lives from a different place, from the choosing of a higher vibration. And we know in unity, another principle is that our thoughts create our experiences. And so when we are holding unloving or hostile thoughts about anyone or any group or even ourselves, those thoughts will create after their kind. Those thoughts will create our experiences. And I hate to break it to you because it was a shocker when I heard it the first time. We are the first beneficiaries of our thoughts. We are the first ones that get what comes out of it, right? We are the first ones to experience it. So thoughts of bitterness, thoughts of hatred, thoughts of resentment, we will create more experiences that are birthed from that energy rather than being able to shift our way of thinking, shift our mentality, and shift our relationship with what is going on so that our experiences are birthed from a shifted consciousness, a higher vibration. And so the question is, do we want to get trapped in a cycle of negativity, of bitterness, or do we want to have meaningful connections? And those meaningful connections are from knowing the truth of who I am, who you are, what is truly happening in this space that God is. Now, I have to tell you, so I have an 11-year-old son, most of you know this, Lucas, and this week they were having, he's 11 years old, he's on chat with a group of people, and they were having a lot of fights back and forth, a bunch of the kids, right? And my son, I wish I could tell you different, but my son retaliates. I was gonna say he'll get there, but more importantly, hopefully I'll get there, right? And so he is retaliating. Luckily for me, he doesn't retaliate at the same level because he's a little bit more innocent than most of those kids, which I'm grateful for. But he retaliated, and I was talking to him about it, and he goes, well, this is how I built up my wall. It's exactly what he said. This is how I built up my wall. And I asked him a little bit more, and he's like, well, if I build up a wall, then whatever they say won't hurt me. And it rings true, right? Because whether we call it that or not, isn't that what we tend to do when we are hurt? When we are resentful, we start to build up a wall. And again, we build it up through words, through thoughts, through actions. So my question to you is, have you kept anybody from your heart today? Is there somebody that you haven't allowed into your heart? I'm pretty sure there have been. I mean, it's true for me. It's true for me when I see what is going on in the world, what is going on in politics, the us's and the versus them. And as much as I want to be in harmony, I live in that energy of us versus them and who's going to beat who and all of that stuff. And it causes resentment in me when I don't see my way happening or what I want or who I want having power or whatever that may be. And so I know that it is taking place within me. And the question is, what do I want to do with that? Because no matter what, no matter who, when we believe somebody is separate from us, what we're really doing is we are giving even more credence to the idea that there can be separation. So if we want to feel our oneness with God, don't we have to believe in oneness? If we want to feel that deepened relationship with God, don't we have to take out all the things that tell us that we are separate from God or that there is any kind of separation? I really want you to hear this. I don't believe that we can fully understand our oneness with God if we don't fully understand our oneness with each other. But how do you do that? How do you move from that space? Charles Fillmore, our Unity co-founder, says, forgiveness is a process of giving up the false idea for the true, erasing sin and error from the mind and body. Forgiveness really means the giving up of something. So what are we willing to give up in order to have more harmony, to be able to express more love, to have more peace in all of our relationships, whether those relationships are physical with somebody next to us or a relationship that we have with somebody on TV or somebody from our past? Yes, there is a component of forgetting involved in forgiveness. We forget the false, that it has to do with you, right? That when you think that somebody wrongs you, they're not wronging you, because guess what? Your truth, who you are, is a divine child of God. If they wronged you, it's because they don't know the real you. They have a perception of you. They have an idea about you, but that's not the reality of you, so it can never be about you, because you is just love. You is just light. You are just divine, and there's nobody or nothing that can wrong that. But sure, they have a perception of you, and that's who they may be wronged. And is there more to the story? Are you seeing it from the eyes of, they just wronged me and I'm going to label them my enemy, rather than coming to understand that we're all doing the best we can, whether we want to admit it or not, and that regardless of what is showing up or how they're showing up, they're also a divine child of God. And can we start to connect from that space? Can we start to forgive from that place? And so forgetting the false, that it is about you and not about what is going on for the other person. Forgetting the thought that we are separate and we are not one. And a lot of our issues are based on that. I prefer to live from the place of truth than from the place of perception. I know I got to live into perception sometimes, but I prefer to know the truth. And I believe that you probably think the same way. And so it is up to us to remember to question our own perceptions of what's going on so that we can move into forgiveness. Now, forgiveness, such an important thing in our spiritual journey, right? Do you know that it's about 90 or so times that forgiveness is spoken about in the Gospels, or in the Bible, I should say? Because it's so important, right? Do you know that in one area where it says the word forgive or forgiveness, does it tell you how to do it? It just says do it. Easy. All right, so everybody, go home and forgive. No, go home and forgive, right? No. Well, I started thinking about it because actually I started to realize that there is a lot that we are taught and shown about how to forgive, right? Like there's a time where Jesus sees that they're about to stone a woman and stops them and says, you who is free of sin, let that be the first person to throw the stone, and nobody threw the stone. That reminds me that forgiveness is about having no judgments about somebody else and to be looking at myself more than to look at somebody else. There's also the story of when, what are you supposed to do when somebody slaps you across the cheek? And it says, turn the other cheek. Many people have thought, that's just, you just got to let them hit the other one also. No. Metaphysically, I would come to understand it is, I'm hurt by this situation, but wait a minute. I'm invited to see it from a different perspective. Look the other way and look at this situation maybe in a different light. What is it birthing for me? What is it birthing in this relationship? What is it birthing in humanity in order for to do that? And it really invites us to come back to center. It really, one of the things that it's for us to forget is that there is anything that could be against us. If we believe in God's grace, if we believe that we are in God, and our experiences are a part of the ways in which we get to move into a greater understanding of that truth, then we have to believe that everything and everyone is working for our favor, whether they know it or not, or whether I know it or not. And so even that thing that really hurt me, even that thing that really challenged me, it's there for me. Because I believe that if it didn't hurt me or it didn't challenge me, then, or that because it hurt me or it challenged me, there's something there for me. Because I have not fully understood my oneness. I have not fully understood what true life is about and what my relationship with God is about. And so it's being brought up so that I can heal that for my ultimate good, for my own spiritual unfoldment. It's that old story that many of you have probably heard too, right? Like there is the Cherokee chief who is talking to his grandson and telling him about life, and says that within all of us are two wolves. And those two wolves are always warring against each other. And one wolf is the wolf of anger, of envy, of jealousy, of regret, of greed, of the ego. And the other wolf is the wolf of joy, peace, love, serenity, compassion, faith, the divine, God. And the boy says, well, which wolf will win, Grandpa? And the grandpa says, the one you feed. So which one are you willing to feed today? Are you wanting to continue to be stuck because you're just comfortable in it, or because you may just not know what to do, or because, let me tell you, forgiveness, I've told you before, spirituality is not for the faint of heart. It takes work, it takes a commitment, and it can be hard. And haven't you realized that sometimes the things that are the hardest are the things that bring you the greatest sense of accomplishment and joy at the end of it, and bring the best gifts and presents to you as you recognize what you're all about? And so briefly, because I know I got to make it brief, I just want to share with you 5 quick steps of radical forgiveness. And if you want to know more, you can reach out to me. You can talk to me after the service. But it's this idea of a radical way and a radical approach to forgive. The first one is to tell the story. Listen, I get it. We're divine and we're human. So we have our human experiences and we have the things that come up for us. So it's inviting us to reflect on the situation and don't make it spiritual. Just allow yourself to fully understand your perceptions, your judgments in the situation. Because if you don't know how you are judging, how can you heal those judgments? What can you release if you don't know what it is that you are releasing? And so you let yourself be as human as possible, be in your feelings, be in your emotions, be in your stories with it. Then you allow yourself to feel the feelings. Again, sometimes we are so ashamed of the things that come up for us in our feelings, or we've been taught that there's good feelings and there's bad feelings, so we don't allow ourselves to really feel. And how can we move from one feeling to the next if we are resisting one? As we know, what we resist persists. And we're not about resistance, we're about healing. And so feeling the feelings, allowing yourself to do that, and then collapsing the story. What that means is just making a decision. Make a decision right here and right now. Are you willing to let go of the story? Are you willing to let go of your perceptions and your judgments and the resentments that it may have brought? And to be able to then do it and see it from the space of God. So no longer seeing it through the eyes of ego, but seeing it through the eyes of the divinity that is within you, that knows that it is an illusion that we are separate, that it is an illusion that anybody or anything can be against us. And then from that space, we reframe the experience. How is this for me? To heal my own thoughts of unworthiness, to heal the ways in which I have not been loving to myself. Maybe it's about creating boundaries, not walls, boundaries, to show ourselves that love, right? To know ourselves enough to know what it is that we need in those situations. And so we reframe the story. We tell that story again from that vantage point, how this is for my spiritual unfoldment. And then you integrate the story. Because it's not enough to have these ideas. It's like, what am I going to do with it? How am I going to integrate it in my life? What am I going to do with this relationship? I'm going to let it go, which you can let it go, or I'm going to be able to heal it and bring ourselves closer together. Or how am I going to move into a place of gratitude for this? Like, right, how many of us, when we have enemies, do we go into prayer, meditation, and gratitude for those individuals? Maybe it's an opportunity right here and right now to do so and to move into gratitude. And I get it. To move from resentment to gratitude, it's a journey. And it's a journey that we are invited into, and it's a journey that we are called for, and it's a journey that we are fully equipped for. Lewis B. Smead says this: to forgive is to set the prisoner free and discover that the prisoner was you. It is time for us to free ourselves from the chains of separation. It is time for us to free ourselves from the chains of resentment. It is time for us to free ourselves from the hurt and the trauma. It isn't easy, but I know and I trust and I know fully with my whole heart and mind that it is our destiny. And it is waiting for us, and it is calling for us, and it is what brings heaven here on earth. So, I'll say it again. Go out and forgive. Namaste, everyone.